at Nottingham Trent University. Then we'll have some time to also summarise and round up on all the discussion points and look to the way forward. Do we have any questions in the chat window before we kick off? No?
Just to say that there's a recording being taken of this presentation, which will be available on this site at the end.
Super, thank you for reminding me of that, Nick. That everybody is aware that we're recording this session. All the speakers and presenters have agreed to that. But it's a nice way that you can revisit some of the information, the contact addresses, some of the information in the slides later on, and also you can view this later too. So you can advertise to other colleagues that they can catch up on the presentation by looking at the recording. So now at this point, I'm going to, in a second, turn off my video and audio and hand over to David Stewart. As I said before, many of you know David from his long career as head teacher at the Oakfield School. And we have a great deal of experience in working with David. First of all, when I was at the University of Nottingham, then at NTU, in developing technology for students with learning disabilities. And David's going to summarise all his experience up for you now. So over to David.
Well, thank you, David. Well, good morning, everybody. And this is wonderful that we can meet together, even if we can't physically be together. So, and welcome to this presentation. So we're going to start today with a birthday. For this year, we are celebrating 50 years since the passing of the 1970 Education Act. And why, you may ask, is that so important to us and relevant to what I shall be talking about this morning? So the 1970 Education Act meant that for the first time, all children, no matter their disability or level of learning, were brought within the education system. It was not just permissive, but laid statutory duties on local authorities to provide education for those with the most severe learning and physical disabilities, who up to that point had been denied education. This was hugely significant. I remember volunteering in what was then a junior training centre when the news was announced, and the general delight of parents and the very mixed views of staff. There were to be many battles to be fought. You will note that Scotland came on board some years later, but Northern Ireland much later. Religion has much to answer for. Having mentioned briefly the situation in the UK, it will be important when working with countries across the globe to reflect on the situation for children and young people with disabilities, in particular those with the most significant needs. Are all children entitled to education, or only those deemed worthy of education? If they are, is attendance mandatory? In terms of inclusion, a country may claim they have no special provision and all attend mainstream schools. But is this the case? There is often confusion in relation to terminology. One might talk of a child having profound and multiple disabilities, but does that mean the same thing in different countries? The term complex needs has also added to the confusion. And in terms of valuing people, you may be working on a project with colleagues from a country where they are eliminating the very people you are trying to help. And I'm particularly thinking here of people with Down syndrome. Lots of moral and ethical issues for us to unravel. Surely COVID-19 has shown us how those with disabilities are not always valued in society. If we look at some of those states in America in the early days of the pandemic, who were saying that people with learning difficulties were not to have access to the ventilators. Who's this young man? So, 20 years after the children with the most severe learning disabilities had come under the Education Act, we were approached by David Brown and the Virtual Reality Applications Research Team, VIRAC for short, to become involved in joint working. They were keen to see how virtual reality might play a part in promoting and enhancing the learning of children with severe and profound learning disabilities. I think it would be fair to say we perhaps did not completely understand the science, but we clearly saw the potential. And so began our journey over the last 30 years, working with David, Sue Cobb, Penny Standen, and the many other researchers at various universities. The next 3 slides are from those very early days. One of the earliest projects was on the use of virtual reality to see if it could promote the learning of signs and symbols, assessing whether pupils learn quicker and, more importantly, retain their knowledge. And here we see David and Charlotte working on a project back in 1993. And Leigh here. Some of you will know Leigh from many of the conferences we've attended. And this is Leigh when he was the age of 12, looking at symbols here on a program in 1993. One of the biggest issues for people with disabilities is the fact of being researched on and not with. We see this often in the medical model of disability, when the voice of the person is often not heard, particularly those with learning disabilities. We decided in 1995 to set up a user group to enable people to have a voice. This eventually was given a name, NICER, the Nottingham Interactive Community for Education Research. It has worked as co-developers with academics and researchers from several universities, and particularly Nottingham Trent and the University of Nottingham. This has not been without its challenges. There are still some who do not think people such as those in NICER can, or indeed should, have a voice in research and development. We can tell you some horror stories. Fortunately, I'm pleased to say that over time, many have come to value their contribution, which has certainly enhanced and refined the development of a wide range of resources and ways of working. We need to be ever mindful of challenging viewpoints and stereotypes. The piece of work illustrated was work we did with Dance 4 on access to dance training for those with learning disabilities. There were some who thought there is only one body shape for dance. Beth, who you see here in the picture, went on to be part of the National Youth Dance Company. And this is where I think we need further research. Was Beth a one-off, tick to box, or have they moved on and are other young people getting that opportunity? I was originally going to label this slide the digital divide, but I decided there were many others. COVID-19 has demonstrated very starkly the divides of poverty, disability, and health. We all know the scenarios when schools were trying to deliver online learning, and many children and young people had no access to devices or the internet. As a governor in different schools in the city, I could see very clearly the difference between those who have and those who have not. We have adults in care homes which still have no access to the internet, and they are left isolated and alone. Some of our group too often have little access at home. This is one of the important considerations when we are developing resources for those with disabilities. Will they actually be able to afford them, or will they be allowed access? I have spoken many times about gatekeepers, those who control access. These could be families, care staff, or school staff. Do they value the involvement of the person with learning disabilities? What are their expectations? We have been fortunate to work with a range of universities, and I think this is healthy. Do not put all your eggs in one basket. They bring different specialisms and expertise. The key thing is to have clear guidelines about mutual respect and be very clear that they must be positive outcomes for all, even if the research gives a negative result. Ensure that all participants understand the research and that when suggestions are made, they are listened to. Remind people about whom this research is to benefit. One area which many of the funding bids appear not to allow for is longitudinal research. By chasing the next round of funding for something new, how can we ensure that the results of current research become embedded in practice? There have been good examples of guidelines. These come from a European project, Keeping Pace with Assistive Technology, in 2007, and they make useful reading. Whilst it would seem obvious to work with clients, do we still see work where the voice of the end user is forgotten? And I would say sadly, yes. For those of you working in higher education, you will be very familiar with the word impact, but it was not always so. In the past, the publication of research in an accredited journal was seen as the final goal. If only 6 people read it, so what? Thankfully, that has changed, and guidance such as that of the Research Council UK enjoins us to ensure that there are positive impacts of the research. Think how the research will reach as wide an audience as possible. Again, longitudinal studies are vital in demonstrating the strength of co-development working. Involving people with learning disabilities in research and development does not just happen. There needs to be careful planning and support. If people have grown up thinking their voice does not count, they need reassurance and development of skills to help them, to speak up in discussion, to challenge an academic, or to present at conferences takes courage and resilience. We have found encouraging people in theatre and drama an excellent development. They learn to project their voice, to hold the head up, to present to an audience, and to develop overall self-confidence. We see some characters here from Shakespeare, yet another barrier we've had to counter. Those who doubt that these young people would enjoy classic drama. Over the years, we have seen a real growth in confidence in the people we have worked with. Being able to talk to strangers about the research and projects they have been involved in demonstrates a real development of skills. Taking questions after a presentation is another challenge they have risen to. It is easy to keep to a script, but question time requires real strength of thought. Be warned, not everyone is generous, so be mindful when you might need to step in. And here we see Abigail at another conference here, working with colleagues. We have been fortunate to go all over the world in many conferences on learning disabilities. The young people have been often the only people there with a disability. Even more important, therefore, that they should be there. There are always issues of funding. Whilst an academic may get funding for a conference, it is much harder for their co-researchers with disabilities. Much more needs to be done on this front. If we're talking about co-development, working together, this is again where we often see another real divide when it comes to people's lives. Our research has encompassed a wide range of work, not just in IT. Here is an example of work on living your life. originally a collaborative project with the University of Nottingham in the 1980s on sex and relationships. The early editions had not involved the client group. The last edition owed much of its success to the involvement of young people and adults with learning disabilities in its revision. It's desperately in need of another revision, and who will take this on? So I throw that out as another challenge for people for co-development. Another piece of work has been on the accessibility of the railway station in Nottingham. We've had many problems with this. We had started, and then of course it had a tremendous fire, which paid to a lot of our research. And then of course COVID has come. But once things get back to normal, we will relook at this. One of the things that people say is we don't really have a problem with many people using with disabilities using the railways. Well, there's good reasons why they don't, because it's so inaccessible. There have been many European funded projects. We just think we have talked about them in previous conferences: ATLEC, Mathesys, Internet of Soft Things, No One Left Behind, and many others. We enter uncharted territory now, and we hope that international cooperation will still be possible. We will all have so much to learn from one another. We must stay strong. You will no doubt be familiar with Apple's Skoog, and the school has been given feedback on its use. One of the first comments was on the change of colour. We like this version, with clear definition of colour. But what did Apple give us? Where was their discussion with the client group? We tend to look at original research from the universities, but we also need to research products which are out there. The adapter is relatively cheap. How can they best be used to benefit the client group? What are their strengths and what their drawbacks? Families will also ask for advice on these devices. The No Isolation robot, originally from Norway, received funding from the Department of Education in the UK for certain educational settings. Do we have good valuation across a range of settings? Some of you may be familiar with the engagement profile developed by Professor Barry Carpenter and colleagues, and has been useful in working with pupils with profound and multiple learning disabilities. However, just be mindful that whilst it is useful as an assessment tool, it must not become a curriculum, as has been promoted in some areas of the education world. These children still have a right to an education. Robots for engagement. This is an example led by Penny Standen, researching the use of robots to engage with those with profound needs. There is still more to be developed here, as children with even greater needs are surviving. Look at these wonderful robots. And they have really produced some interesting research. But can a school really afford them? Work has been done on the use of cheaper alternatives, which are more likely to be bought and used by schools. Here we see some of the group working with researchers from Nottingham Trent University. Testing, and then what? What is going to be the benefit for the client group? not just the people who are in the nicer group, but for many other people with disabilities. The person who's the researcher may get their PhD, they may move on, great success in their career, but what is left for the people, the clients? This is something we really, really need to do a lot more work on. So finally, we currently live in very uncertain times, but in all this, we must stay true to the cause of co-developed research, empowering those with disabilities to engage. I've spoken already about drama, and here is a picture from a production of The Decameron, where the characters are isolating from the plague. Sounds rather familiar. Boccaccio's words sound very familiar to us. Open the windows and wash your hands with vinegar and rose water. Thank you for your attention this morning. Take care and stay safe. Thank you.
Okay, David, that was a fantastic talk. Thank you very much for managing to summarize all of those key issues and challenges we face over a long period of time. Can I ask anybody who wants to ask a question to load it up into the chat window so I could see it and David could see it, and then we can ask those questions to David. Or alternatively, if you prefer to put your microphone on and ask David a question directly, please do that.
Do you want to take the picture down, David?
I can do that, yeah. So David, I'm going to ask a question to start off, and it's a really interesting question in that, I'm saying it's an interesting question, in that, you know, we've been asked to contribute to the government inquiry on the potential of online activities for young people with learning disabilities, especially in lockdown in COVID-19. But as we were discussing recently, in some cases, young people have even less opportunity to get online than some of their other counterparts. What do you think about that?
Well, I think what it has shown is not just for people with learning disabilities, but for many other groups, just this great divide. We have an assumption now that everyone will have access to the internet, everyone will have suitable devices at home, and clearly that's not been the case. In one of the schools that I'm a governor, I think they had to send out 200 packs of work to children. And these were the children that had no access to the internet or devices. And this was in a secondary school. Another school where I'm a governor, every single child had access. So you can just see in the one city, the whole range of access. When we've been working with adults with learning difficulties during lockdown, there's no doubt some people and their families have come on board and they got devices. Other people are, as I say, living in care homes where they don't even have any internet access at all. So those people haven't been able to engage. So yes, just in a snapshot of one small city like Nottingham, we can see a real disparity of opportunity.
Thank you, David. Any further questions for David? Okay, well, thank you very much, David. Oh, I have some here. Yeah. So let's have a look at this question. So do you think that what has happened with COVID could be a further shift to online education?
I think there certainly probably will be, but I think in terms of we need to be doing a lot more about the evaluation and benefits of that. Certainly for many of the young people with severe and profound learning difficulties, one would question how valuable or not that has been. in terms of, for people who are concrete learners, you know, who need personal interaction with people, it is much more difficult to engage them. So I think you have to look at the whole range of people. There's no doubt that many people on the autistic spectrum have actually felt more confident and comfortable using the online learning. And we're certainly hearing anecdotal stories of, you know, people that much preferring it, not so anxious about going into school and really enjoying the learning online. So I think you have to look at every individual and assess the benefits.
Thank you, David. So the next question is from Ann Baldwin from Nottingham City Council. David, have you found over the years that students involved with projects with NTU and I guess other universities, University of Nottingham, have been beneficial for your students, and how?
I think in terms of, if we think of just where they came from, you know, what I said, these were the last, particularly the last lot of children in the system. And I think it's just wonderful that the young people have embraced the work with the universities. They're not overawed by it. They may have brothers or sisters that have gone to university, so they're familiar with that term. And I think there have been many benefits in terms of, if we have in our own city 2 wonderful universities, why shouldn't the people with the most severe disabilities benefit from what's going on? They may not be obviously be students there, but it doesn't mean they can't benefit from the work that's going on. And you know, that whole ability to work as co-developers, I think has really, I think the benefit has been both ways. I think the sort of quality of the research that has come out has been enhanced because people have worked with people with disabilities. When I first worked with children with disabilities, I doubt whether any of them would have understood the word university or known what a university was. And I'm very pleased that 50 years later, that the young people are very familiar with universities and feel very confident about working with academics and other researchers.
And I would just like to add to what David said, many researchers at university wouldn't have visited students in school to understand what their needs are, whether you're a computer scientist or in another discipline. And David's school and other schools have been incredibly welcoming to researchers, computer science researchers, to help them fully understand who it is we're designing this assistive and enabling technology for. And that's very valuable too. So I completely agree with David. And to answer Dan's questions, it's been a two-way process. Both sides have learned and increased the quality of the outputs and enhanced the impact too of the research. Thank you for that question, Anne. Now we're going on to Claire from the Emmanuel School. David, are there any devices you would recommend for students with disabilities when at school, or good apps to use on an iPad? Students find it difficult to concentrate, and I can see that Andy's already responded and said that there are many of the outputs and software from all the projects we've been developing with the Oakfield School and formerly the Shepherd School at that web address at isrg.org.uk projects. So there's lots of free, open, accessible software there, but there's other resources as well. So David, would you recommend other resources as well?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. I mean, absolutely. Look at those resources that have been developed over many years, because for the children that you may be working with at Emmanuel, they may have slightly different needs to those, say, at Oakfield. So you'll need to decide what you find useful and what doesn't work with those youngsters. I think in terms of programs, My Appearance has been a particularly good one, which we often refer to, but it is still one of the useful ones. Those that are are the programs that have been around work, the environment, travel training, all those very practical skills. Some of the early work we did on supermarket, although they're sort of old now, they certainly, the principles are there. I think, as you know, it's trying to find programs and devices that will engage the young people, and looking at what's on the market, what's affordable. We've certainly found robots very engaging, and certainly a whole range of students have found those. And there are cheaper, the ones that we use with the universities are the very expensive ones, but we have been working with a whole range of others. Andrew, I don't know whether you want to say anything about devices. Andrew Crooks.
Hi. So in your PowerPoint, it was saying about the adaptive controller for the Xbox. So we've just purchased one of them, and we're just starting to use that different peer groups. So I don't know whether, obviously, as a way of engaging the students, is that obviously once they've done a piece of work, or whether they could go with their peers. And also the adaptive controller that we bought is it enables somebody with fine motor skills, with difficulties with fine motor skills, to play a computer game with a peer who can hold what you'd call a normal control. So it's worked very well at school. We've just started to use it, and it's we've found it very, very good for the students to be able to interact with their peers. So that was something I was going to say after. Also, some of the computer apps, we have Choose It Maker, which is basically it's an app, or it's a piece of software where you can create your own topic-based multiple choice questions. So that if they're very engaged with ICT and computers, that's a good way of getting them in it. So there's lots of different software that we do have at the Oakfield School that maybe could pass on to Nottingham Manuel.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks, Andrew. Do we have any further questions for David? Okay, I do think, thank you. Very helpful, David. Thank you very much from the floor. That's superb. We're going to now thank David from not just for today's presentation, but from his long history in supporting the research of both universities, University of Nottingham and Nottingham Trent University. I'm going to call a quick comfort break of 2 minutes, and then we'll start the next presentation on Pathway Plus. So we have 2 minutes to turn ourselves around and start the next presentation. Okay.
Thank you, David. Right.
Okay, is everybody back? It looks like it. So our next presentation is going to be on the Pathway Plus project, which is a mobile pedagogical assistant to develop meaningful pathways to personalized learning. So what is our project in a nutshell? The results of our project, an app and a handbook and manual, will help teachers, teachers, teaching assistants and SENCOs to spot and track engagement by the use of an app. It uses sensor data within the app to look at where students are looking, their eye gaze, their body posture, and their facial features, and gives a readout of engagement using a very simple traffic light system. And that allows teachers and teaching assistants and SENCOs to support those with greatest learning needs. Once you understand engagement using this very simple traffic light system, you can then re-engage students, the ones who want to engage, using a range of strategies developed by Ann Baldwin and Fiona Gray and Nottingham City Council Inclusive Education Team. Ann's going to go into further depth about how you re-engage students in a very practical approach, but there are things like asking a question to suddenly re-engage students, doing an activity for students who've lost concentration or momentum, taking a message for students who might need to move to re-engage, those kind of things. But Ann will talk about the interplay with the output of the app. It recognizes by the traffic light system a student isn't engaged and what you do to re-engage that student. I think it's very important to realize the prediction of the app. Its algorithm has been trained on data gathered from students from a wide range of European countries, with students with mild and moderate learning disabilities. These include schools in Belgium, in Bulgaria, in Turkey, and in the UK. And all of that data gathering is safe and secure, as it's been guided by an ethical application at the University of Nottingham. So not only have we got this very robust app which tracks engagement and outputs engagement using a very simple traffic light system, we also have a handbook. And the handbook has been developed by our Bulgarian partners and Nottingham City Council to develop very simple and practical guidelines and approaches to re-engage students should engagement wane. We also have partners in Bulgaria who developed a very nice manual to describe the technical aspects of the app as well. How you download it and how you use it, how you can go on gathering data to help us train our algorithm, but how you can use it in real time in a lesson situation to help you understand if your students are engaged or not. We know that there are other ways to track engagement, and as in all the technology we develop at NTU, this technology is never meant to replace what you already have. It's meant to augment it. And it's important, we think, because we know without engagement, deep learning is not possible, or effective teaching, meaningful outcome, real attainment, or quality progress. So currently, you might use a global scale, like the Special Schools and Academy Trust scale, as you can see on the right-hand side, with 7 components or facets of engagement. One of the challenges in the use of this tool, we think, is that this is a global measure, which involves many observations over a long period of time. And sometimes different teachers would give different ratings for the same students. What we hope our app does is use sensor data, which has been trained on the visual patterns and attention patterns of lots of students across a lot of schools across Europe, will give a consistent, instantaneous reading of engagement to support things like the Special Schools and Academy Trust engagement scale. So, before I hand over to Ann, who will describe ways of re-engaging students should engagement wane, I just want to summarize what Pathway Plus is about. So our project measures engagement while the lesson is taking place using sensor data, just using the camera on the phone to look at things like body posture. Is the student moving forwards or backwards? Eye gaze, are they looking at the screen when they're learning, or do they tend to be inattentive? Also facial features as well. And it uses all that sensor data and its algorithm, which has been trained, as we said, on lots of students, and we continue to train the algorithm, and it outputs engagement as a simple traffic light system. So you can see this student here is ranging from engaged to not engaged, fully engaged to not engaged to partially engaged. So this allows a Senko, teacher, or teaching assistant to understand which approaches best engage each individual student. You can try a different learning, just different teaching materials, and then you can work out using the app in real time which best engages that particular student and develop a personalized learning pathway for that student, because we all understand that students with learning disabilities form a very wide range of learning needs. It's a very heterogeneous population. So that will support them, teachers, teaching assistants and Senkos, to direct their attention to those in greatest learning need. I'm going to now hand over to Anne. And Anne's going to talk about, once you understand what the engagement is for that student, what do you do next? Over to you,
Anne. Good morning, everybody. Just before I start, I'd just like to say that as this project nears completion, I'd like to say that on behalf of Nottingham City Council and the Inclusive Education Service, what a real privilege it's been to work with Nottingham Trent Uni and all of our European partners on this innovative project. And often in our jobs in the Inclusive Education Service, as advisory teachers, we're often asked if we know of any useful apps or technologies that we can recommend. So being part of this project has been so useful for us in terms of that. And we've been able to learn about all the other projects that are happening that Nottingham Trent and our European partners have been working on. So it's been really, really useful. So I just want to say thank you for including us in that, and we look forward to working with you again on different projects. Before I move on to this bit of the presentation, I am going to switch off the camera so that you can concentrate on the slide rather than me. And also, I'm not in control of my slides, so I will have to say next slide, please, at the end of every slide. So please excuse me for that. OK, so I'll just switch off my camera. OK, so as the slide says, we've identified using the app that a student is not engaged. So, you know, what do we do about that? So we've developed a What's Next handbook that will give you some ideas on what, as teachers, you can do next to increase engagement. We've tried to keep it short and simple. I think it's about 9 or 10 pages, and we didn't want it to be a massive document. We wanted it to be really easy and quick to access. It provides simple ideas to teachers to try in order to try to re-engage students. But what it also does is provide you with an evidence of a process that you've worked through. If, should, at the end of the process, you need to refer the student on because you've worked through this process, but you've still got a concern that they are, I'm still on the first slide.
Sorry, Anne, just 1 second. So I think a lot of these people are saying they can't see the slides. So I'm just going to restart. I think it's because we cut away to your. I'm going to restart and get back to your presentation, and then you tell me where you are. Okay, can everybody see these slides?
Can, yeah.
Super. Okay, Anne, I'm going to switch off my mic again, and you just say forward whenever you want to go forward.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, so as I was saying, it will provide if you work through this process, if at the end of it you decide that a child or young person is not engaging because there's a further underlying difficulty, having gone through the what next section, it will give you evidence to show these are the things that I've tried, however I think there's something else. Next slide please. So the what next section has been split into two main parts. The first, just an example of quick fixes that teachers can apply or use to re-engage students when they're not engaging. And I just want to clarify here that we're not talking about the students with social, emotional and behavioural difficulties who are not engaging, because you don't need an app to identify those students. This is more subtle than that. It's initially for the students with learning difficulties that are not engaging, but also it could be useful for other students as well. So the quick fixes section. It's simple teaching techniques that can be applied with a little pre-planning to re-engage students. It's only a sample of what's out there, but it's an idea or something that you can evidence that you've done. And these quick fixes that I'm suggesting, which in the What Next handbook, for example, ask a question or do an activity. The What section does go into it a bit more than that, but they may be all that you need to re-engage some students. And then the app, you can use the app to help you to monitor that that has been successful. However, if after you've applied all the quick fixes and you're still identifying difficulties with engagement, you would move on to the second section of the handbook. Next slide, please. And this is where you begin to really focus using the app for a longer period of time to try and establish if there are patterns to the disengagement. Is it a particular time of day? Is it a particular lesson? Really begin to unpick. And again, you may not need to go any further than this. This may provide you with the answers that you need. You may spot that, oh yes, it's always in the morning. Maybe that, and you may be able to unpick the reasons for that. So you may not need to go any further than that. Next slide, please. However, we've also developed a comprehensive checklist. I haven't put it up there, but the headings on the checklist are the ones that you view, and it's a comprehensive checklist of inclusive practice, which includes all of those areas. So at this point, we would suggest that you start to go through this checklist and try some of the ideas to see if there are any other barriers to that for that particular student in terms of engagement. Obviously, not all of the ideas on the checklist will be relevant to all students, but lots of them are. And again, next slide, please. You'll use the app to give the ideas a go. So, for example, showing on the slide now, one of the things that is suggested is, does the student need a wobble cushion? Obviously, there are lots more ideas on the checklist, but I've just picked that simple one. And you would then trial that idea again using the app and over a short period of time to see whether this has made any difference. And as you're doing all this, you're building an evidence base of things that you've tried that have or haven't worked. Next slide, please. So this diagram shows how we think you'll use the app. So you'll start with the app and you'll measure engagement. The middle section shows the process that the What's Next handbook takes you through. It's almost a plan, do and review process, really, trying different things that you can use to increase engagement. The last section shows that after you have exhausted all the other obvious or not so obvious solutions, you may need now to refer to an outside agency. Talk to your SENCO, talk to the parents, because you're now beginning to consider that there may possibly be another underlying difficulty that needs more specialist investigation. But you have now got a really good evidence base of strategies that you've tried. You've got the evidence from the app that the student is not engaging. It almost, I feel, bypasses somebody coming in from outside and saying to you, have you tried this? Have you tried this? Because yes, you've already tried all the things that you could, and actually you're now concerned that there is an underlying difficulty. Next slide, please. And really, I think this slide just says it all, really, and evidence is why we have done the work that we have in this project and why this project is so important. And the app at the moment is actually being trialled by teachers across the city. And once we've gone through that process, it will actually be available free to download. But I think we would all agree that increased engagement does give us better outcomes for students with mild to moderate learning difficulties. Thank you. That's my slides complete.
Thank you very much, Anne. So before we go on to a live demo of the app by Nick and Andy from the Interactive Systems Research Group, I'd like to emphasize that there are two other outputs from the project. The first is a handbook for teachers, trainers and SENCOs to describe more fully, as Anne has just said, how you use the output of the app, the traffic light system, to re-engage students. And this is where the What's Next section is housed. But there's also a deeper investigation on the use of technology and technology to engage embedded in theory as well. This has been developed by the National Association of Professionals Working with People with Disabilities, and that is based, NAHU is based in Bulgaria, working with a special school in Bulgaria, both in Plovdiv in Bulgaria, and they've been working with Anne and Fiona from Nottingham City Council. And the handbook also looks at what are the effective pedagogical approaches, inclusive checklists you can use to re-engage students. It also looks at the impact you can achieve with this kind of tool. As Anne said, deeper engagement leads hopefully to better learning outcomes and more quality progress. There are 9 chapters in total to the handbook, delving into the theory and ending up with an What's Next section. Additionally, because we think you need a guidance on the use of a technological app, there'll be a manual for teachers on using the app. This looks at things like how you download the app onto your device, how you then use it potentially to gather more data, which helps us to train the algorithm to make it even more effective in your school, or you use it just to monitor in real time the engagement of your students, and then use that traffic light system to try different learning strategies to re-engage the students. This is a free open educational resource, and you can use it blended with your existing special education training and learning resources. And this has been developed by the Centre for Special Education Support in Plovdiv. The researchers from Plovdiv are really concentrated on making the design of the manual very visual. So it will guide you through very easily in terms of setup of the app, and it's used to gather more data, to train the app, to train the algorithm, and or to use it to predict engagement. And Andy is saying in the chat box and chat line currently that the website is here and you can get and download all information about the project as well from them. I'm going to leave this slide current because at the end of the session, I want to host a little bit of feedback on about whether you think this approach is useful, how might you use it, what the next steps might be, including tracking engagement over time, and if crucially you want to be involved between now and in the coming period to pilot the app. But before we do that, I want to hand over to Nick and Andy to do a little presentation of the app in real time. So I'm going to stop presenting and hand over to Nick and Andy.
Right, so I'm just trying to get the live demo working at the moment, and then I'll share my screen with you and we can see the live demo in action. It is just causing me a bit of a problem at the moment.
So currently the app runs on up-to-date iPhones and iPads. So we're talking about iPhone 10s and above, and iPads running. Which version of iOS is it, Nick?
It's the
13.
Yeah, it's 12.113, I think.
Okay, so it's fairly modern devices. So essentially from a couple of years ago. So it's Apple devices from, say, 2 years ago. So Nick's trying to get one of these devices running the app to actually display on his screen currently.
So while Nick does that, partners might want to start loading their questions into the chat window, and I'll start looking at those while Nick continues to load the live demo. Or you can just unmute and ask me, talk to me.
Right, if I return back to Teams, I should be able to share my screen. I'll share my desktop. Where are you? Where are you?
So we have for partners from all the schools in Nottingham, you might be interested to know that it's actually we have partners here from Bulgaria and Belgium and Turkey as well. So we have a few questions coming in. Is it appropriate for autistic children appropriating and engaging? I don't really understand the question. Can you explain further? MS? Mellors, Senko, sorry. Because we are looking at, we're looking at the level of engagement for students with autism, but I recognize that engagement might be displayed in different ways for students with autism. So it's very important to train the app with data from students with autism so that their pathways can be personalized as well. Not only that, in our new project, we're looking at, thank you for the clarification, we're looking at not just engagement with students with autism, but also meltdown and rumble moments. So our new project will look at when the kind of gestures in involuntary cues students with autism make before meltdown occurs, there's a rumble moment. And if we have an alerting service and an algorithm trained to recognize it, then teachers or parents or carers can intervene with calming and de-escalation strategies so that the student experiences less frequent and less severe meltdown moments, leading to better mental health for that student and also a classroom free of emotional trauma. So I do think personally it's appropriate to look at engagement for students with autism, but remembering the app would be trained on students with autism rather than a more general population. And I'm also very interested in looking at using this kind of approach to predict meltdown moments as well, so that we can intervene in time and provide de-escalation strategies. Does that answer the question? So the other question is, are there recommended apps that we'd use in conjunction, or is it standalone? So at the moment, the app is standalone. You'd use it to look at engagement, and then you might have a whole variety of learning materials that you know is evidence-based that re-engages your students. So you're welcome to use this with any of the learning materials you currently have, the best ones that you know work in practice for your students, so that when the app detects a change or a transient change in engagement, you can come in with these learning materials to re-engage them. At this point, Nick and Andy, are you ready to go?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, I'm going to hand back to Nick and Andy to do the demo.
Right. So I now have my desktop shared with the app. So I trust you can all see now an iPhone screen on my desktop. Yes?
Yeah.
Good. Right, so I'm just going to run you quickly through the features that you will encounter. When you currently install it, you're asked to install it via test flight. Test flight is the mechanism by which new builds can be managed. So opening up test flight, if you tap open on the right there, it will open the app. I'll just have a quick look at the test flight details. If you tap on the left on the under pathway games, you get a brief summary of some more details. So it's asking you what kind of things do you want to test here. It's got a link to the development team, so you can send some feedback, including a screenshot with it, and some more information about updating the app and so on. So it shouldn't really get in the way of you. You should just be able to start the Pathway Plus app straight away. Thought I'd just show it to you. So starting the Pathway Plus app, you're met by this screen. This is the original screen. These are the various games that we use for data collection. So these aren't the things that we're asking you to have a look at the moment. You'll feel free to go and investigate them, but I'm not going to spend too much time on them now. What we are asking you to look at is going to the top left of the screen and tapping the menu icon, and you get these 5 options, and we want to choose the live option. When the live option's running, then you'll get this screen with an eye at the top, indicating whether the gaze is being captured or not, and an indicator at the bottom of the screen which will go from green to yellow to orange to red, showing whether the app believes you're engaged or not. So if I just move out of the way a bit, you'll see at the top of the screen the eye has gone red. So that means that it can't detect my face and it's stopped doing any analysis. Now it's black again, so it is seeing my face. We have 2 settings at the bottom alongside the indicator. We have a window which sets the length of time that samples are gathered for any particular results. So at the moment it's sampling the 5 previous seconds to come up with the decision of how much engagement I'm showing. So that window can be varied from 1 second to 20 seconds. On the right hand side there is tolerance. The tolerance can be set to low, medium and high. High makes it less sensitive, low is more sensitive to variations in engagement. You need to access those by going to the top left, into the menu and going to settings. There at the bottom are these 2 settings. I'll just change one of them, so I'll just change the window to a second. You need to tap done and then click the disc at the top right of the screen, settings saved, and then you can go back. And we now have a window of 1 second, so it varies a lot more quickly. So that's really the how the app, the features of the app function. And another important thing is screen positioning, because you need to position it so that it's consistently seeing the student's face, and that you are able to see the indicator and thus act upon it as it changes. So I don't know, is there anything else I need to discuss about this now? I think I've gone over the
That's fine, Nick. That's very helpful. Yeah, I think thank you, Nick. You've covered the main features, showing very nicely how the engagement level with the traffic light system changes as you look away into the screen. So this part of the session now, really, we want to go back to the presentation and just load up the final screen to have a round-up discussion really on to collect your thoughts and to garner your interest. We're still looking for people to help us trial the app. As Anne said, between now and Christmas, we know that's not a lot of time, but we have some nice, very simple trialing materials, a questionnaire. If you want to trial the app in your classroom, have some equipment, please contact me on my email address, which is there, david.brown@ntu.ac.uk. It's not too hard to remember. If you want to be involved in the trial, please email me and I will pass on your details to our colleagues at Nottingham and in Serbia who have been developing the software, and they'll register you to download the software and you can trial it. Again, we can also give you links to the handbook and the manual, and you can give us some very brief feedback, which we can use to improve the app and the manual and the handbook before we deliver. But let's go back to this series of questions to finish off this session. So really, and you can put this in the chat window or you can talk to me. Do you find this approach useful in terms of measuring engagement? How would it be used? What would you do with the feedback? Would you include it in records of achievement, in students' records? What would be the next steps? So at the moment, it's instantaneous engagement, which is monitored, even as Nick's just explained. You can change the window from a couple of seconds to much longer to look at engagement over a relatively short period of time. But would you like to track engagement over weeks or days and have that printed out in some form of teacher-facing dashboard? And the last question is, please let us know with your email address if you want to be involved in trialing the app. So, we have a question or a statement from a colleague in Belgium. The range of the applications could be a big range, but we have to be careful in terms of, because we're gathering sensitive data. And I think what we have to emphasize to all parties here is that all data used to train the app is held in a very secure service. When you're using the app in real time, no student image is kept for any period of time. It's just instantaneously used to determine whether that student is engaged. But that includes in schools and in workplaces. We're developing this further with companies as well to look at arousal in workplaces to see whether we can do anything to intervene when people become aroused or perhaps anxious as well. Is there any further questions? Or also, okay, we have from Mellors as well. I think it would be interesting to use this tool to look at children who feel particularly disengaged with a certain subject and then try some of the strategies suggested. Excellent comment, and I think that's exactly what Anne had in one of her diagrams. I think she said, I know in the handbook, in the what's next section is you tried out to maths, in English and in other subjects to see how that engagement profile for that particular student would change across subjects. And do you want to come in and comment there?
Yes, exactly that. And it could be that after perhaps you've identified that they're disengaged in English and you go through the process, and finally you might decide that there's an underlying issue. Perhaps, it may be that they're dyslexic and they're having difficulties actually accessing English because of that. But you've been through a process and you've got the evidence to show, actually, I've tried all these things now, and there clearly is something else that's underlying, causing the difficulties. Or it could be that you are able to solve it quite simply using some of the strategies in the What's Next handbook. But as I did say, there's lots of others out there as well, and they're just ideas to grab quickly.
Thank you, Anne. Further questions, please?
Does that step onto the mainstream stroke learning disability kind of distinction? Because we've trained the app on students with mild to moderate learning disabilities in the large, haven't we? So it is most applicable to them, and we would like to expand it to other areas as well, and try using it on other areas. But the group that it's being tested on is that specific one.
Thank you, Nick. That's right. This project aims at developing an app for students with mild and moderate learning disabilities, but in future we will extend and generalize its use to other populations, including students with autism in our new European project, but also in our project at Smart Campus at Nottingham Trent University, where we have a data collection tool to tell the algorithm what attention and engagement looks for university students. And that's sometimes quite challenging as well. Okay, thank you. And so we have a question now from Windmill. Is there some information that could be sent on this, i.e. a step-by-step guide or demo video that you could send out, just thinking about how to discuss it with head teachers? Yes, sorry, Windmill there. I forgot to probably emphasize that the handbook and the manual do describe this. How to use it, but Nick and Andy have developed and Anne have developed a very nice cut down version about how to set up the live mode to monitor engagement in real time. So we're going to send out these instructions or this guide to everybody who's registered here today. So we will send that in, or alternatively, do use my email address and put directly your questions to me as well, so that we can respond as well. Okay, so Andy's just said that we have a simple set of documents which explain this, which you could be sent. So please do email me on brown@ntu.ac.uk, and we'll make sure you get that very simple set of instructions about how to use the app, how to use the What's Next section. Once you get the traffic light system, what you do next, developed by Anne and Fiona at Nottingham City Council. And then on top as well, you'll also have Nick's very simple explanation of how to use the live mode.
So are we sending out the manual and the handbook as well?
No, we're just sending links to those to begin with, Nick.
So
we're just sending the very simple documents to go out at the moment.
Yep.
We don't want to overwhelm everybody here to begin with, but yes, everything's available, and it's Creative Commons as well. So these are free open educational resources for you to use. We've already received the money from the European Union to develop and evaluate these apps and the handbook and the manual, and they're all free to use for education. Super. Any more questions? Okay, next question. Maybe we can use this app with the same child, but making adaptation on their environment in order to measure when they feel more comfortable. Mariana, I think absolutely. That's exactly what we intend to do. If you go back to look at Anne's section, this is another area of personalization you can use. Students with autism might be incredibly sensitive to their environment. I think there's the recent stuff I was reading is that challenging behavior is not inherent to autism. It's the reaction of the child interacting with their environment. So if you recognize via the app that the student is disengaged or more likely going to meltdown moments, then you can change their environment to see what effect that would make. We're also interested, interested in this in university. We're trying to look at what environments best promote higher education student learning to change the environment itself to maximize the relationship between engagement and learning and adjustments to the environment to promote learning. So that's a very good point. Any further questions?
I think that's quite a good set of questions we've had there as well. Thank you very much.
Super. Thank you. Well, thank you, Nick and Andy, for your demos, and thank you, Anne, for your What's Next section. Okay, on behalf of everybody here, I'd like to I'd like to thank the presenters in that session. We'll now be moving on to the next person in our session. It was Marisé Galvez-Trigo, who's going to be talking about educational robots as well, and looking at the factors that affect the uptake of robots. Now, Maria, I think you're going to be presenting yourself from your screen, so I'll stop sharing.
Yes, hello. Thank you, David, Nick, Andy, and everybody involved in organizing the event. And thank you for inviting me. So, as David mentioned at the beginning of the event, and now I'm a PhD student and researcher at the University of Nottingham. And today I'm going to talk about the research that I'm doing for my PhD about how to increase the uptake of robots in special education. So, as I said, I'm a researcher. My background is computer science and engineering. And I'm mostly interested in human-computer interaction, in human-robot interaction, and how to make these technologies accessible, but in a broader sense. So also taking into account financial accessibility, prior knowledge requirements accessibility. So we're talking about benefits of educational robots. So David Stewart highlighted that they've been involved in some of these projects using several robots, and I'm glad to be said that I was also involved in some of these projects with them. And we actually saw that the use of these robots is beneficial for children in special education. And one of the reasons why, as David Brown highlighted, was an increase in engagement that is very important for learning. And this contributes directly to goal achievement. And we also observed, and you can see in other studies that have been continuing around the world, although these have been focusing on using the robots with children that have autistic spectrum conditions, they also help with the development of social skills and collaboration skills. And what is an educational robot? Some of you may ask, and this is simply any robot that can be used for educational purposes. These are photos of some of these robots. These are the specific robots I've been working with, but you might go to toy shops or look online and see all the different robots. These ones in particular range in price from £50, £60 to £6,000, £7,000. So as you can see, the difference in price is very, very different. Depending on what you consider your students may need, you would want to go for one robot or for another, or not go for any robot at all. So why are not these robots being widely used then? Because we've seen that they're not widely being used by schools, because they are really not accessible for teachers, teaching assistants, parents, or children with special educational needs. And this is for various reasons. I'll go more in depth into those reasons a bit later in the presentation, but these icons can give you an approximate idea of what they might be. And why? Why are they not accessible? Well, basically, for manufacturers of these robots, special education and accessibility are not the main targets. They're really mostly focused on STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education, but focusing on mainstream schools and on teaching children in mainstream schools how to code and the logic behind programming, which is very good. But if we've seen that there are benefits of using these robots in special education, why shouldn't they make small adaptations or considerations to make them also accessible to those schools? So how can we change this? We decided that we wanted to try and change this by running a co-design of a new system to control these robots, involving parents, children, and young adults with special educational needs. And this is what we've been doing. We've been running some sessions, some co-design sessions, and we also analyzed and tested several commercially available robots and their control apps, and came up with a set of results and potential issues. And we ran a series of workshops and questionnaires with these teachers and parents. We weren't able to get children directly involved, and we had some sessions due to start at the beginning, spring this year. So COVID made us have to change the plans, but hopefully later on in the project, we'll be able to get them involved as well. And what we found out after running these analysis and workshops is that there were a set of main issues that prevented special schools from using educational robots, and that if we followed a recommended characteristics set that these experts in special education think could make them suitable, we could potentially increase the uptake of robots in special education. So the main issues that we identified through the analysis and through interviews with teachers, we actually interviewed in a first study 13 teachers from the UK and Spain about this. We found out that the main issues that everybody highlighted was the price. And this is because those robots that offer the most options, let's say, are quite expensive. So the cheapest humanoid robot that we could land our hands on and we could find was around £400. And then they went up to £7,000 with the Now robot, which is sort of a child-sized humanoid robot. It's very good, but it's very expensive. And for a school to be able to decide that that's a good investment, they need to see a very clear benefit for the students. Another issue that they highlighted was that they lacked a user-friendly interface. Most of them required prior knowledge of coding or programming. And although this might seem easy for some people, teachers already have a full-time job, and they shouldn't be required to learn coding or learn programming to be able to use a new technology with their students. They also lacked appropriate ways of interaction. And this is very important in special education because, as you know, not all the students can interact with a tablet, dragging and dropping items on screen precisely. And what we saw is that in all the interfaces to control these robots, they were based on block programming, as they call it. And it's basically you have like puzzle pieces that you drag from one way of the screen to another, and then you can tap on them and edit text to change the behavior of the robot. But this can only be done currently in these apps through drag and dropping with your finger from one way of part of the screen with another. We specifically tested these apps in devices such as iPhones and iPads that already include support for assistive technologies such as switches. And the way these interfaces have been made, they're not compatible with even these features that are included in the operating system. So it was impossible to actually control those robots with a switch or with a SIP and PUF device, for instance. We also see that they highlighted the contents were not appropriate for the students. That's because, as I said, these apps were focusing a lot on teaching STEM subjects and coding and programming. This is great, but if you go to some students, it might be more relevant to teach them life skills or how to count money so they can go to a shop and actually buy something, rather than teaching them how programming works and the syntax used to create a program. And lastly, we saw that for each robot, you need a specific app that's been made by the manufacturer of that robot. Indeed, for some of them, you need several apps. That was surprising that for one of them, you needed, if you wanted to do different activities, you needed an app for each different activity. And these activities were basically, as I mentioned, coding, programming, and then another activity was just through a joystick-like set of buttons on screen, moving the robot around. And you need to download different apps. That means you need to have your computer or iPad filled with a lot of apps, remember which one goes with which robot, remember the differences that they might have in the interfaces, etc. And teachers found this not to be practical, also because in a special school, you have a range of children and you might want to have maybe 2 or 3 different robots. So all children or a wider range of children can benefit from using them. And then after running these sessions with those teachers, we went on to analyzing more in depth those systems and running workshops with more teachers. In this case, we have 32 teachers, also from Spain and the UK. And they helped us identify a set of main recommended characteristics that they thought could make these systems more appropriate for their use in special schools. So the first recommendation was to not focus on only one way of interaction. So developers or designers of these systems need to think and understand that not everybody will want or will be able to just drag and drop items on screen. There may be the need for support for speech control, eye tracking control, switch control, etc. And for this, they need to be compatible with assistive technologies. So as David Stewart highlighted, there are some adaptive controllers already out there that are quite good. But if they are the device you're using them, but they're not compatible with the interface, you have to control those robots. That doesn't make sense. You wouldn't be able to use them. Then they suggested that for the user interface, the best color combination was to use black text over yellow creamy background. And this was to gather for a wider range of students, including those that may have also visual impairments, and to not use colors that were too distracting for some students as well. This might seem very obvious, and I was surprised when I saw it, but of course, they recommended to avoid the use of rapid blinking lights. And I say it's surprising because we found that in some of the robots, some of these default activities, such as press the button and the robot dances, included rapid blinking lights on the robots. This is not just important for special schools. I think this is important in general, that this should be something that either you receive a warning on screen saying that there will be rapid blinking lights, or something that you can disable. Then again, for an interface, it's important you have, let's imagine an iPad, and ideally you want all the elements in the screen to be big enough for people to see them clearly, for people to interact with them clearly, and that they fill the screen well. That this recommendation came because we saw that in these interfaces, some of the elements were quite small, difficult to see even for the teachers, let alone some children. Of course, if you have the space on screen, why not make it more accessible for everybody? Then they found very important, since these interfaces are not meant for the teachers only, but they're meant for the children to be able to interact with the robots. It's important to have pictograms with a clear meaning complementing the text. And this is because some children may still be learning how to read. They may not be able to read. They might have a reading disorder, and having these pictograms with a clear meaning, because some of the ones included in some apps were confusing, could add a lot of value to them. Then another recommendation that was important was to not make the app rely on an internet connection to work. Many teachers highlighted that having an internet connection and added functionalities through internet was a very good add-on, but that if it's a requirement and you cannot use the robot at all without an internet connection, that's a problem. And that's because some schools do not have a good internet connection, or they have some limitations in their connection. So devices cannot connect to some cloud servers and things like that. So it's important to take that into account. Teachers and special education experts also asked to have personalization options, and this is because there are a lot of different students and each student has different needs. And they found that it could add a lot of value to one of these systems to have a set of personalization options, so you can adjust certain settings depending on what students you're working with. Compatible with several robots. I mentioned already that for each of the robots that we tested, you needed a different app, and they found that it'd be brilliant if you could have just one app that can give you a simple to use, easy to use interface to control them. Even it does include some changes from robot to robot depending on what are the capabilities of the robot, but that's acceptable. They also highlighted as important that these apps include rewards for the pupils. That's because many teachers highlighted that for some of the students, the robot had a lot of value because they saw it also as a reward after the learning activity, and that it is important to have also customizable rewards, so that maybe you can make the robot perform a dance or say a encouraging sentence or something like that. And last but not least, do not require coding or logical programming prior knowledge to use or create activities. This is because, as I said, many of them relied on a block programming interface, for which you need to, if a teacher wants to create an activity, usually needs to sit down for several hours with the app and find out how it works, and then create an activity, and then run that activity with the children, but that was very limited. It's actually quite easy to provide already an interface that doesn't require this. So it shouldn't be a requirement for anybody to know how to program. So what's next? As I said, we run these analyses, we run these workshops, we also came out with a prototype. So we have first prototype, and what we want to do is to evaluate it. This is because we want to find out if the co-design of this prototype and the inclusion of the recommended characteristics in it can help with the uptake of robots in special education. And how do we want to do this? So we want to run a series of online workshops. Due to COVID restrictions currently, we have to adapt everything. So rather than using the physical robots, it could be using the interface with a simulation of a robot in the computer. And of course, the use of a physical robot could be subject to a risk assessment and discussion with specific schools. But the experience should be pretty much the same. The difference could be that instead of seeing the physical robot, you see a simulation. And in January, online restrictions shouldn't affect this, but of course, depending on how many people sign up and participants availability, we will look into the date. And who we want to call for experts in special education to be involved, and this includes teachers, head teachers, teaching assistants, SENCOs, or any SEN professionals, and the parents of these children, if any parents want to be involved. Of course, if you are in one of these groups and want to be involved, please get in touch. You'll see my contact details in the next slide, because we would be very looking forward to getting a lot of people participating in these sessions to see if this is the right approach, if we should change something in the approach, or if there's something that should be recommended to follow by all other manufacturers or designers of systems to control educational robots. Thank you very much for your attention today. Let me know now if you have questions or suggestions, or just email me later if you don't want to voice them in the chat, and email me also if you want to participate. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria, for that really excellent summary of the factors affecting the uptake of robots and calling out for further special needs teachers to get involved in your trial. Can we have any questions for Maria? I can see that our European partners are saying they're also already using EV3 and Scratch to program for children with dyslexia. And this has proven to be very efficient in terms of stimulating engagement, which kind of correlates to our studies here with Penny Standen as well. So that's very interesting. Carl, do you want to say anything further on that?
Yes. So
I'll go to Carl first, and then I can see David's in my little lecture theatre, because I've gone to lecture theatre mode, which is very nice.
So just one of the issues that that the children with dyslexia have is it's not only the point of being dyslexic and reading, etc., but also the issue of order, the issue of being able to manage different tasks, the time management. So what we have seen in work that was done in Belgium was that the EV3 programming combined with rebuilding the EV3 has actually contributed to all those elements. So on the one hand, they are engaged to learn because it's fun. But secondly, also the order of the tasks are being respected because they know they need to follow the order of the tasks, because otherwise it will not work. But because they are engaged, they do have a barrier against it. And then, of course, time management, which is often a very big challenge for children with dyslexia, the time management. So you see actually how educative robotics can contribute to aspects that sometimes we forget. I remember when we did the EduRock all together, we were focusing on also on the autism spectrum, but I've learned throughout the years all the many other challenges that can be addressed, and the specific example that I wanted to highlight here is for children with dyslexia. So thank you for the good presentation, Maria. Well done.
Thank you, Carl.
Yeah, thank you for the highlights, Carl.
Yeah, thank you for those observations, Carl. The next person I can see with their hand up is David Stewart. So over to David.
Thank you, Maria, for your presentation. I just really wanted to say thank you for all the research that you have done over the years. Very, very clear, and pointing out all the issues that there are in terms of the use of robots, and hopefully that more schools will take this on board, because what you've done is a lot of the groundwork for schools. So you've already highlighted what the issues are, how they can be overcome. So I think this is a really good way forward. So I do encourage other schools to work with you.
Thank you, David. Just on that point, can I ask the other schools here present if they have ever considered or have already started to use robots in inclusive or special education settings? So we have people using Windmill Primary are using B-bots.
Yeah.
How is that?
We've seen several schools that use B-bots.
Yeah.
I think they're quite affordable as well. So that's one of the reasons why most schools have maybe decided to get them. But yeah.
I think they're very affordable, aren't they? And that, with the now robots is completely different, isn't it? So we have from Mariana, we have in Cyprus, we use robots in kindergartens as well. Mariana, can you say what kind of robots they are?
Is that B-bots themselves, B-bots or something else?
Excuse me. Yeah, we use B-bots a lot. So yeah, in kindergarten to do different activities for learning different materials. Also for socialization and general. And I think the main reason is because it's very friendly, the interface for a child, and it's cost effective.
Thank you, Mariana. That's brilliant. Interesting.
Those are two of the main points in Maria's work, aren't they?
So Claire from Emmanuel School, are there any affordable robots that you may recommend for secondary school students? Maria.
So I guess that depends on what affordable is to you. For instance, we have, as Carol highlighted, the EV3 from Lego. I think here in the UK, you can get one from between £300 and £400. And there is also one robot that it's called EZ Robot JD, which is a small humanoid that is also, I have it in one of the slides actually. So I'll go to that slide. And that's also around £400. Those I think are quite good for the second one for any age really. So the EZ robot is the third from the left, and EV3 is actually the second from the right. And I think those are quite good for secondary school. And if you consider the £300, £500 bracket affordable, that's also good. But yeah, that also depends. I have people telling me that £50–60 is expensive. So it depends on the budget, on the country as well.
Okay, that is really interesting to hear what might be affordable for certain schools. Andy's put a link there into the chat window, and I can see another hand up, which is Carl. So Carl, please go ahead.
So what we have been trying to do as well is to look at second-hand sets. These are sets, for example, resold on Amazon, and they are a fraction of the original cost. And so far with the sets that we bought there, we never had any problems. They're perfectly working, and they were 1/4, 1/50 to 1/10 of the original price. There are a solution that can easily be found for those that have a limited budget. And the good thing is you get an invoice, everything is okay. So this is one of the options I could recommend.
Thank you, Carl, for that observation. I hadn't really thought about doing that myself, but some of the schools here might think about that. I think we've always thought costs might be a major barrier, Maria, to utilisation. I think David thinks that as well. But let's see what happens in the coming years. But I fully agree with David Stewart's observation that Maria is doing a huge amount of the groundwork, looking at the barriers and challenges to the adoption of robots in special educational in special education, and that's really useful for a lot of the schools here. It should be disseminated across the Nottingham Schools network. Any final questions for Marisé? Okay, super. Okay, Nick.
It seems like what you're wanting to define is a generalized interface that will allow simplified access to various functions of different robots. That's where you want to be eventually. The simplified interface maybe gets more complex as you dig into it, but at the surface is presents you with do this or do that or do that, and that's it. How how do you get that to interact with all the different robots? And is it a case of getting the manufacturers to present a consistent interface that you can talk to, or do you do it the other way and make something that appears consistent and it's logical to the user, and then say, look, manufacturers, pull your act together, get your act together, and do something to fit in with us? What do you, or is there another way? What do you think the way forward is?
So right now what I'm doing is creating an interface that's compatible with those robots that offer the possibility of linking them with external interfaces that other people make. I think it's going to be very tough to convince manufacturers that they need to follow these recommendations. One of the reasons why, and one of the examples that I have, for instance, is in this slide, if you look at the blue little robot that's the third from the right, this one was great when I started my PhD, and anybody could, with programming knowledge, could program the robot and create an interface. However, last year they closed the access to all the tools that allowed you to do that. And I've tried to contact them on several occasions, telling them that I'm doing this research, and for us it's very important to make these robots flexible for special education and everything, and they never replied. So I understand it will be super difficult to convince some manufacturers, but there are a decent range of robots from different price ranges that offer this possibility of other developers interested in making things accessible, creating their own interfaces, like the Now robot, which is the one in the middle, the two robots that I recommended for the secondary education, the Zero robot, which are the two on the sides that are ball-shaped. All of those, if you have programming knowledge and I don't know, something that moves you to do it, you can create this unified interface and link it to those robots. So I'm focusing on that approach because convincing manufacturers is super difficult. We might reach a point where they see the value and they decide to do it, but currently I think it's going to be very difficult because special education is not a big money maker for them. So they lean more, as I see it, towards creating something that's flashy and appealing for mainstream schools and also for the entertainment industry.
Yeah. So if I can just summarize, there's some opportunity with manufacturers opening their interfaces up to access, and where that's happening, you can begin to develop. But a lot of manufacturers just don't recognize that as worth the bother, and they're going after the big shiny.
Yeah, they just want to highlight how good the product is as it is, and of course it's the extra work for them. So
what we need to do is plug away at the interface and make that more plug-inable. Yeah. And just hope that the other manufacturers say, oh, okay, we can open this API to that. Right. I'm getting very technical now, so I'm going to say.
Okay, but thank you. It was a really fruitful discussion. Thank you, everybody. So I think that concludes the questions for Marisé. Carl, still have your hand up. Is that another question, or is it historical? I think it's historical. The hand went down. Historical hand. I think it's a legacy hand, isn't it? I think it's known as. Okay, thank you so much, Marisé. Please, everybody, do reply to Marisé if you want to get involved in the trial. So our final presentation today, it's a pleasure. Our final presentation today is from Kieran Woodward, who is a PhD student at Nottingham Trent University. Kieran has been working consistently with the NISA group to design tangible interfaces to help students express their emotions. Kieran, I'm going to switch off my microphone. Over to you.
Can you see the slide?
I think it's just coming on. It's there now, Kieran. Yeah, cheers.
Okay, so thank you. As David said, I'm Kieran, a PhD student from Nottingham Trent University, presenting of students. So it's more than ever to consider the mental well-being of young people, as they're experiencing more stress than ever before, and with 20 to 40% of people with learning disabilities experiencing symptoms of poor mental health, and their mental well-being issues are often misattributed to their learning disability or classed as challenging behaviours. So to make mental well-being technologies more accessible, we propose the use of toys, embedding various sensors and using artificial intelligence to automatically understand students' well-being. So this technology could be implemented throughout schools to help monitor and reduce stress, as well as improve communication between children, teachers and parents about mental well-being. So children's toys are ideal for developing mental well-being interfaces, as children are already familiar with them, making them accessible, and they can embed sensors which can be used to monitor well-being along with real-time feedback to help improve well-being and promote the communication between children. So we've conducted two co-design workshops with members of the NICER group, as was discussed earlier. So during the workshops, we've explored a range of designs, sensors and feedback through a range of methods, including storyboarding, which provided the participants with the opportunity to express their ideas. We included real-time designing and 3D printing a device that you can see on the slide during the workshop. So this helped to demonstrate how their design decisions have a tangible impact on the actual devices that are developed. We included prioritizing cards. So each card had a different requirement, such as the design of the device, the sensors, its feedback, and users were invited to prioritize them based on which features they thought were most required. So this helped us understand those people highly requested the ability for the devices to automatically understand how they're feeling. And finally, we explored the electronics. So we allowed them to test the different sensors and feedback that can be incorporated within the devices. So the different technologies explored during the workshops included various physiological sensors, such as heart rate and skin conductance, along with motion sensors to measure how the device is being moved, for example, if it's being shaken. Along with sensors to measure touch, so we could measure how hard and whereabouts the devices are being touched. And then different forms of feedback were also explored, so including visual feedback such as multicolored lights. These could be used to represent different emotions, vibrational feedback, which users found calming and could be used to help improve well-being, and then audio feedback, enabling calming sounds to be played. And finally, fidgeting tools such as buttons and sliders that allow people to interact with the devices to help relax them. So when exploring the sensors during the workshops, we found that the ease of use of the sensors was highly important, as the physiological sensors measuring heart rate and skin conductance were slightly more difficult for some people to use, as you have to keep your finger placed on the sensor for it to take the reading. We also found that haptic and visual feedback was preferred over the audio feedback, although conveying information through the coloured lights was not always understood. So we found that there should be two distinct categories for the devices. So those designed for younger children, are the softer devices such as the Teddy on the left, which only measure touch and motion and include visual and vibration feedback, and then separate devices for older children that can include 3D printed interfaces such as the cube on the right, which can also embed the physiological heart rate and skin conductance sensor to help give a better indication of well-being, along with the vibrational and fidgeting tools such as the blue buttons to help people relax. So there's many opportunities for these devices. The first is using artificial intelligence. So the devices can connect to an Android app over Bluetooth, and then the app then uses the sensor data in an AI model to automatically sense the current state of well-being. And then if poor well-being is detected, the built-in feedback can be automatically activated. Alternatively, the devices can use their Bluetooth capabilities to connect with each other, as you see in the top picture. So this allows children to communicate and support one another using the touch and motion sensors, along with the visual and haptic feedback. So for example, if a child shakes their toy, is touching it harshly, this could trigger feedback in their connected device used by a friend. So then this friend could gently touch their device, which triggers calming feedback back on the original device. So overall, tangible interfaces and toys present many opportunities to embed sensors and feedback that can be used to sense and intervene in children's mental well-being. And the use of Bluetooth and AI enables the devices to automatically detect well-being and for the devices to connect with each other to create support networks and promote communication about mental well-being. So finally, we have some questions to consider and welcome any feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Kieran. Excellent. Thank you very much. So can we please stack up the questions? Kieran's asking for feedback around design and functionality, additional features. Would you actually use them in your school? What would be, would the ability to automatically monitor student well-being be beneficial? Is real-time feedback going to improve well-being? Would the ability of the devices to communicate with other devices be beneficial, of other people? Would you be interested in trialing? Because Kieran's still looking for further populations to trial with. So if you have any answers to those questions or discussion points, please either raise your hand, put it in the chat window, or speak to Kieran and myself directly. So we have the first question. So, and it's picking and Andy, what about longitudinal testing, Kieran, of what you've been doing?
Yes, so currently the longest trial has been around 2 weeks, so it hasn't really been longitudinal trials, but that's definitely something to consider in the future. We was planning to do a larger trial earlier this year, but with COVID, that's hasn't been able to happen. It's definitely something to look at in the future. Yes,
I think what you have done, Kieran, is longitudinal co-design, because you have been involved with the user group, and you might want to describe that, your involvement with NISA.
Yes, as well as the 2 co-design workshops that we've run, we've had sort of the focus groups within the NISA sessions throughout the time. So this has helped to sort of get feedback on the devices that we developed from the co-design workshops. It helped develop the approach to collect data that was then used to train the model. So we went through different iterations of labeling the data, collecting the data, which has now been used to sort of train the AI models we can use.
Next question is from Andrew at Oakfield. With the current climate, what is the range of Bluetooth?
So I think theoretically it's like 50 meters, but any obstacles will get in the way of this. But within schools, it could be used if they're in the same classroom or playground. There shouldn't be any problem there.
Is there a problem between interacting with devices in neighbouring classrooms?
So again, it would really depend. Bluetooth, it should theoretically be able to go between neighbouring classrooms, but it could depend on other interference that's nearby. But neighbouring classrooms should be okay.
Very much a case by case kind of thing to determine how far the interference goes, or whether you are being interfered from another classroom, or whether you can communicate between classrooms, whichever is your use case that you want. Yes.
Yeah, definitely. There's sort of no one answer. It will depend. But within the same classroom, or sort of in an outdoor area such as a playground where you'll have less interference and less obstacles, it should definitely work.
So the next question.
Yeah, next question comes from Mellor School, the Sanko Mellor School. Kieran, how would these devices monitor the interaction children have with the toys, and would it give data back in terms of a report?
So it can monitor the interaction in multiple ways. So for the sort of soft devices aimed at the younger children, it's mostly focused on touch and motion. So how they move the devices, where they're touching, how hard they're touching. Whereas then sort of the 3D printed interfaces can also include the heart rate sensors, the skin conductance sensors. This makes that better for the AI model to infer well-being. It doesn't currently give a report, but it's definitely possible. It can log all of the data, and then a report could just be outputted based on that.
Does that answer your questions?
I think it does. I think that's generally the state of play that we have with the apps here, is that they are not networked up to provide a common report back on a number of students or anything like that, and that's something that we certainly want to investigate.
Any further questions for Kieran? Kieran, I have a question, and I know you know the answer, but I want you to tell people is that, you know, you're designing an approach for a very wide group of students in terms of their abilities, their cognitive, physical, and sensory abilities. And it's very hard to train a model with all of these outliers with people with different skills. How do you, in terms of your approach, how do you cope with that?
So the one approach for training the models has been developing personalized models. So we've conducted a separate experiment, a controlled experiment, just to collect more data. And then this was used to train a model. But then we collect individual data from the users and then use their data to personalize a model specifically for them. So this helps improve accuracy for each user, because obviously how they interact with the devices and their physiology can be different between each user. And the data we need from each user to train the model isn't much. So just a few days sort of them using the device to collect data where they label when they're feeling happy, when they're feeling sad. We can then use this to develop the personalized models.
And I think that's very important, because if you're looking at inclusive or in special education, you think, well, how can I really truly personalize my learning approach or my well-being approach to students with very individualized needs? And I think the approach you've taken with your algorithm is specifically suited to dealing with that wide range of abilities and needs. Any further questions for Kieran? Super. Okay, we're coming to the end. Thank you, Kieran, for that presentation. We're coming to the end of the session. I'm going to ask now if there's any global feedback. We started with David Stewart really reviewing the involvement of universities in research, co-research with schools and students with learning disabilities. At the beginning of the project that we started doing 25 years ago, I think we still envisaged what we're doing was researchers from university working in schools, and people in schools weren't really considered or posited at that point as co-researchers, which they are now. So David's taken us through that complete journey. Then we presented the outcomes of the Pathway Plus tool. the app to predict engagement using a traffic light system, the manual and handbook which accompanies this, and calling on people to get involved in trialing of the app and the handbook and the manual. And if you want to get involved, I've had some requests already, please email me at david.brown@ntu.ac.uk and we'll get you set up an account, and please do continue to help us trial that app. Then we had Maria, and she was presenting on her PhD work looking at the barriers to the adoption of robots in special education. And Maria herself is asking for further people to be involved in her trial. Finally, we had Kieran presenting his work on tangible user interfaces to infer mental well-being and mental health of students within classrooms via an analysis of their interaction with the device and using artificial intelligence. And again, please get in touch with Kieran or myself if you want to be further involved in that project. Everything that is being said today is recorded, and we'll make sure everybody has access to that recording. I'd like to thank all the presenters, David, Anne, Nick, and Andy, and Maria, and Kieran. So we're getting some thanks coming through now as well.
Can I just...
You can say anything you want.
So I've created a feedback form, which would be really useful for us because we love to get feedback on our events, how we can improve them, how you found it, what you were interested in, what you weren't interested in, and there's the opportunity there to add your email addresses if you want to have any further information on particular projects that we've worked on. So I'll be circulating that form following the meeting. I'd be really, really grateful for any feedback that you can give us. It's only a very brief form. Please fill it in and return it to me, and I'll give you the instructions how to do that.
Yes, let me iterate as well. Please do fill in the form. Great. People are saying leaving, but saying we will fill in the form. Thank you very much. Any further comments? So we're getting lots of thanks as well as people are leaving. David, do you have a last comment you want to make? Are you on mute, David?
Just to say thank you very much to everybody. Thank you for all those presentations. And I do hope that particularly schools who've been part of this have felt this has been a valuable morning. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you for that comment, David. Thank you. So it's been absolutely great to meet everybody online to talk about a range of enabling technologies for special and inclusive education. We'll continue to do these talks organised via Nottingham City Council, via Ann and Fiona Nottingham City Council, via the Nottingham Schools Trust, Pat and Sarah Fielding. And thanks to all our international partners. We're not just people here from Nottingham. We have teams at NAHU and the special school in Plovdiv. We have Phoenix KM from Belgium here as well. And we have teams from Serbia, Soft Q&R as well, and teams from Turkey as well in terms of Red Fact. So it's been an international meeting held in Nottingham today online. Thanks for your attendance. We'll distribute the link to the recording of the meeting, and please do fill in the form. And for Andy, please get in touch with the individual speakers if you want to get involved in trialling of the projects as they move forward. If that's all, I'm going to end the session.
Hi, David.
Please go ahead.
Will the contact details be emailed out to people if they want to get in contact with the speakers?
That's a really good point, Andrew. And what I'll do is when Andy, when we distribute a link for the recording, I will write out to everybody who attended and say that if you want to get in touch, to get involved in the trialling of Pathway Plus, contact me in the first instance, and I'll put you through to the technical team. For Maria's project, get in contact with Maria and Kieran as well, and I'll list the separate email addresses. can we put it all on the project website? Let me have a look at it. Yes, Carl, we'll upload all of the information as well to the Pathway Plus website. Thank you, Belina, as well. Thank you for Colette as well, leaving. Maria, thank you for your presentation. George in Cyprus. Mariana in Greece. Andy. Dimitar, George. Brilliant. Okay, thank you for attending today, and we're leaving now.